Alright, here's the story. We're doing backyard mechanics again, and we're replacing the clutch and a whole load of seals in this today. Now, I went and got it stuck in a bog hole on Adelaide Road, and you would have seen the clutch judder I got after that, and it's been doing that ever since. So we've got a new solid mass flywheel and clutch setup to go in, and I'm replacing the transfer case input output shaft seals. We've got a leaky rear main seal on the motor, so new rear main oil seal, and pretty much every other seal I can get to while I'm down there. Before I go any further, I want to say that it's probably not ideal to be doing a clutch on the floor. You should be using a hoist really, or paying a professional to do it. Everything you see here is as a guide only, and I'd recommend that you seek a professional's advice or get a professional to do this. So take everything I say with a pinch of salt.
The last time I did a clutch on the ground, we used 2 trolley jacks. Since then, however, I've heard it's a good idea to use an engine crane pushed in through the car door and lower the gearbox through the transmission tunnel that way. Sounds legit, so that's what I'm doing.
So I bring every other bloody thing out here with me, and then I forget to bring the memory cards for all my cameras. So you nearly didn't get a video on this, but luckily I decided I could be bothered and drove all the way back home, got some memory cards, and now I've come to grab my workshop manual and I've left that at home too. So I'm not doing that a second time, I'm just going to wing it.
One thing I can do without a workshop manual is remove the drive shafts. You've got to mark them so as they go back on the same way. Put them on wrong, and your ride is probably going to become a 2.5 ton vibrator.
Like a boss. Yeah. Oh, rounded D's nuts.
Happens to the best of us.
Nah, give me the gentle persuader. Stinks. Oh.
Alright.
Okay.
In my experience, a tail shaft isn't always that hard to remove. A bit of heat worked wonders in this case.
Look at that.
Hey Jack,
Yeah.
you want to touch my shaft? That's all automatic transmission fluid, that's why it's so shiny and greasy. That's the leak from the transfer case I was talking about.
Before the front tail shaft comes out, the sway bar has to be removed. The front shaft comes out the same way, but don't forget to mark its position and which end is which.
So that's the front shaft out as well. It's probably taken me an hour and a half, 2 hours just to get 2 shafts out. They were ridiculously tight, it's hard on the floor.
I'm still just pulling off bits that look like they need removing.
Oh, what a wank stain.
What?
These things, man, they're always round.
This is the clutch slave cylinder. One does not need to remove it, only to disconnect the hydraulic line. A peach tin is required to catch the clutch juice, of course.
See my vest, see my vest. Mail from real gorilla chest. See this hat, 'twas my cat. So, we've got that off there. And this bracket was bolted up there. This is on the driver's side of the car. So that unbolts from there. That can all be tied up out of the way later. So this is ready to drop down. Now I'm just following this loom along here. That loom is these tyre things. So I've untied it. Just got to undo the plugs. 2 plugs there, and I'll follow that all the way back, disconnecting it.
What have I achieved so far? Not a lot. I busted my finger open, so I've had to put some betadine on it and bandage that up and wear one glove, Michael Jackson style. And I forgot what else I did, but now I've got to take the handbrake cable off the centre and remove the gear sticks and all that stuff from inside, and then we just buzz the bolts off where the transmission's held onto the engine, and then it's coming down.
So getting the handbrake cable off, that's it there obviously, is as simple as removing this little bracket there from that stud. Up in here is the end of the cable. It's a little bit tricky to get, but you have to rotate that up and pull it out the hole in the top. But if you're doing this, you'll see what I mean. Okay, so I'm up to the removing of the gear sticks. There's a plate that runs around the two of them. It's got about 6 10mm head bolts, and that simply lifts off. Then you've got a scungy looking gear boot around here, you pull that off. And then there's a third gear boot which seals all the stink from diff oil seals all the stink from transmission oil out of your cab and stuff. Okay, so removing the gear selector lever was pretty easy. Once you get all those rubber boots off, there's a little circlip, just undo the circlip and it pops out. The four-wheel drive select lever was a little trickier. So this sits on a shaft through there, like that. Underneath is a 10mm nut, and going through that entire hole is this little tapered pin. Basically, you have to take the nut off the bottom, leave it on a little bit and smack it with a hammer until you can't hit it any further, and then you just have to use a punch to drive this pin up the rest of the way. And after that you can just lever this off the side. So we manoeuvre the engine crane into place and wrap this industrial grade rope around the gearbox, being careful to position it so that the weight is distributed evenly. With some of the weight taken up by the crane, the gearbox crossmember can be removed, 2 nuts securing the gearbox to the crossmember, and 4 bolts holding the crossmember to the chassis on each side. From here, it was all hands on deck to get this thing out, so not a lot of video footage was created. Okay, so there's the gearbox. It's easier to show you where all the bolts are when it's out, because it's just too tight under there. That spot there is where your starter motor sits. You have to remove your starter motor to get the gearbox out. So make sure you're disconnecting the battery before you do that, or else there'll be sparks, explosions, all sorts of madness. That disconnected, and these guys are located around the edges. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are your top 2, they're going to be the trickiest. To make it easier to get to them, To make it easier to get to these two, we took the cross member off. You lower the gearbox a bit, still attached to the engine, the whole engine, everything will tilt back, and then you can get your hand up, get the bolts off the top. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all around, and these brackets here, which go onto the side like that, or is it like that, or is it like this, or is it like that? Like that, I think. They go on the side there and brace the gearbox further to the engine. You take those off, all 6 bolts around there. So we came here to replace a clutch and a dual mass flywheel for a solid mass flywheel. And it's already had a new clutch and flywheel at some point in its life. This is a solid flywheel. But if you get up nice and close, Jake, can you see that discoloration? So that's a hot spot or something, and that's what causes it to judder, drive like a piece of shit.
Let's be realistic here. What turned out to be nearly a 3-day job cannot be packed down into one video. At least not without being incredibly boring. So in part 2, we're going through the process of installing the new clutch, a handful of new seals, new handbrake shoes, and throwing the car back together. Will it drive out of the shed under its own power? Probably not, given my lousy skills, but we can only hope.
Listening to the low murmuring on the other side of the door with great interest.